But when you can clear your head like that of all of the junk and really focus and turn internally on what's going on right now, it's like all of a sudden your strengths become a lot more clear. And as you build and grow and lean into those strengths of yours, it's like, how do I leverage those to help build my dream? So I think you get to know yourself a lot better. It's like all of a sudden that goal becomes a lot more feasible because you simplified your life.
The banyan tree is a tree unlike others, a representation of resilience and strength through its ability to overcome the status quo and fulfill its purpose.
It knew that it was meant for something bigger and didn't allow the limits of other trees to confine its growth.
And our story looks similar. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Mindy. And our hope is that every one of our listeners learns to take up all the space they were created to, just like the banyan tree.
Welcome back to the Banyan Effect podcast. I am your co-host, Leslie. And today, Mindy and I are talking about a topic that we talk on here a lot, is about growing into the best version of yourself. And growing into the best version of yourself means that the simple process of growing is a process in itself. And as we are both on the path to growing into the best version of ourselves too, we recognize the importance of being present in the moments along the journey, especially because this journey of growth is never really over for any of us. So today we're coming here to talk about how we grow into this great version of ourselves, meanwhile being present and mindful of all of the wonderful wins and experiences that we have along the way too. If we don't really, we can get to the end of this journey being the end of our life, not having recognized that there was a lot of good experiences along the way that we lost because we were in a constant state of growth.
Yeah, in a constant state of like wanting and desiring and hoping and wishing our lives away to some degree. Because the dreaming big dreams and having aspirations and goals is super, super important, especially if you are somebody that wants to live a great big life like you and I do. However, I know that you and I also have definitely caught ourselves kind of wishing these days away. Last week we talked about like the ones and twos. And while you're in this pattern of growth, there are a lot of the ones and twos and the fives and the sixes. And if we're not careful, we end up wishing all of those mundane days away that are such a big, important part of our end goal, because we're constantly striving for the accomplishment of the big dream. And then anybody out there that's ever accomplished a big dream realizes that once you hit it, you have not arrived. Like there's then the next big thing in life. So today we just want to talk about how we continue to be big dreamers, because that is so important in life, but also not miss the good old days while they're happening. Because I know that I certainly have looked back and thought like, wow, those were the good old days. And I was wishing then to be where I am now. But now my kids are older and I'm older and there's these other challenges and stuff. And I just wish I would have wished those days away, and I would have appreciated the journey and the good old days.
Yeah. Well, it's the people that we talk to on this podcast and who we are ourselves to are the people that are in this constant state of growth. I know we both have really big career visions, personal visions. We've both set goals to run marathons before and do all of the things. And just like you said, it's like when you get there, it's not all of a sudden, it's like, okay, now my work is done. Like it is built into who we are as people to be in this constant state of like, okay, well, what do I get to do next? And what do I get to try next? I think we're always wanting to challenge ourselves physically and emotionally to just grow. And when you're doing that, obviously you're going to keep setting the what's next literally for your entire life. And so I was happy about today's podcast and just the mindfulness of it, because I too definitely get stuck in this trap. I think back even in all of those growth chapters of life, when one closed, immediately one opened and I was going for the next one. And then all of a sudden what I had didn't feel good enough anymore. And that's what I think we need to try to avoid and figure out, like, just because the next chapter feels bigger or you're growing into this something else doesn't mean that the chapter before isn't big and bold and worthy of our praise as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And today we're going to focus on like the importance of appreciating where we are and how we're getting to where we want to go. But also, I want to make sure that everybody understands the immense importance of dreaming. Because if you don't dream, if you are just like, we certainly do not ever want to suggest that settling that's a very different concept than like thinking big and dreaming big and yet at the same time being content with also where you're at in the process of achieving your dream. And this is something that I just think is important to mention, because I know that there are people out there like my husband who really has struggled to dream. It's like it takes a lot for me to like get him thinking outside of like, because there is something really awesome about being grateful for what you have and who you are and who you're with, and being grateful for like the life that you have, right? And so there's this balance of like being super grateful of what you have and where you are, but also figuring out how to dream and how to chase after like we were all destined for really big things. And so just as much as we're like, we have to like be grateful for where we are now, we also can't lose sight that like if we don't dream, we're never going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the idea of, I mean, having the dream, 'cause I totally agree. We are not here. I don't think it is in either one of our bones to be people who are going to just settle with where we are. And this is just life for as we know it. So the idea of a dream is super, super important. What I like about it in terms of this perspective of looking at it in present day is the dream to me helps me focus and stay aligned now. So like, can we use the dream to help us choose the right activities now to help us get there? So it's like you can be present in your day-to-day decision making and your day-to-day activities and appreciate all of those experiences that you're having. But with that big dream and that big goal up the road, it's like it keeps you sort of on the right path versus it can be really easy to go do all of these different things that ultimately are going to veer you away from the path that's leading you to the dream up the road.
Yeah, it keeps pulling you back to center.
Exactly.
Right? Like on those days that are ones that you're like, I just want to give up. This is hard. Life is hard. I'm struggling. It's like when you have that vision of a bigger dream, it keeps pulling you out of that. Otherwise, if we don't have something big that we're aspiring to, we can just kind of get caught up in the negative emotions.
It's like the kick in the butt that we all need on the days where you're feeling defeated.
Yeah. And that's where I think mindfulness comes into play. And like, I feel like it's one of those words. What does that even mean? What mindfulness, right?
So
because there's so
now,
many.
right?
Yeah, it's almost, it's similar to the word manifest, where everybody, it's this big buzzword that everybody's using, and you don't even really know what it means anymore. And it's or like gratitude. There was a period of time where I heard that word and I would just roll my eyes like the biggest I could absolutely roll them, because it just felt like there was just this overwhelming push for this movement, and it just I didn't even know what it meant anymore. And so I feel like mindfulness has come to that a little bit, where we hear it all the time. We're reminded of it on podcasts and social media and everything, but we then sit down and ask the question of, what does mindfulness even really mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
Right. Mindfulness, I mean, to me, it's sort of like that checkmate of, I actually don't even checkmate is the right word, but it's like the the core. It brings you back to the foundational elements of who you are. I mean, I think about the mindfulness activity that we both just did of the 12-hour walk. Now that's a super extreme one, but it brings you back to who am I? What's my personal vision? It helps you alleviate all of just the mess that is the world around you and just recenters you. And I think about the power of doing that 12-hour walk while having this big dream at the same time. It's like, it's hard to, I can like visually picture myself like getting back to the core of who I am, and it all of a sudden becoming this clear shot right to the dream, and because all of the mess disappeared. So to me, that mindfulness helped me appreciate who I am and what I'm doing with my life and where I am with my life. But at the same time, it's like shined a bright light on my dream in the future of how I'm going to get there. So I think mindfulness can really just clear your head and do both the I'm present day. I mean, you cannot be present when you're on a 12-hour walk by yourself. And it helps you sort of see the vision of your dream more clearly.
Yeah, I think that for me, it really means taking a deep breath and slowing down for a minute. Because, even today, I had to take Kenzie all the way to camp. It was a 5-hour ordeal to get her to camp, register, get back. And then I immediately had to hop in one car to my car to get to my chiropractor appointment to get back. And so it's days there's lots of days like that in my life, especially in the summer months when we've got kids that need to be driven here and there and all over to sporting events and whatever. And so for me, mindfulness is when I just even remember to like stop and take a deep breath and just remind myself that I am safe. Everything is okay. I have this mentor and it drives me nuts, but because I know that he's right, and it always drives me nuts when people tell me to do something and I don't want to do it, but then I know they're right. And so he always says like, all is well. I am safe. And anytime he says that to me, I'm just like, shut up. Like, I don't want to hear that, but it's so true. If, in these moments that I'm just like, there's a million things going on. I can't, you're not in the moment, right? You're always thinking about, I need to do that. I need to do this. And then tomorrow I've got that and this and that. And you're always like trying to think 2 or 5 or 7 steps ahead. And then you can take a deep breath and literally be like, okay, right now, no one's dying, right? Like things are okay. Everything is good. And you can just take a breath and be like, okay. Yeah. Remind yourself of some of those mantras, or, like the saying of, 5 years ago, I was praying for this life, or, whatever those little memes out there are. They're cliche because they're true. And so that is mindfulness for me, is when I can just slow my brain and my physical being down enough to take a deep breath and just realize that everything is fine. Everything is okay. It's more than okay. I'll blessed to be stressed, right? And so when I can do that, and then remind myself and like talk myself off the ledge and be like, okay, everything is good. I just need to, like, I came home today. I'm like, I need to eat something. I need to take a deep breath. Everything's going to be fine. I'm going to get everything I need to get done. And then it slows me down enough to just, to then move on and be aware of where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, I really like that. Think like all of those little experiences, like sitting in the car by yourself for 2 minutes after you drop your kids off at school. Like sometimes that 2 minutes is the best 2 minutes of the whole day, or the first sip of coffee in the morning. It's like those moments allow you to, if you can do what you just did, where you're like, just slow down and breathe. It's like all of a sudden you have this moment of, okay, this is good. Like right now is good. This is good. And it clears your mind, then it gives you the fuel then to, you're both appreciating that moment and giving you the fuel to be like, okay, now I'm ready to go again. And I'm going to conquer all of the things that I need to do. But right now, this is good. I love it because it's giving you both the appreciation for this moment right now and at the same time refueling yourself to go get working on the dream later in the day.
Yeah. And I think just sometimes I think I tend to see red because there's just so much going on that it's hard to even cut through everything and see the beauty of life and where we are. And I have, we have teenage kids, and that's a wake up call, right? There's only so many more years of these quote unquote crazy, chaotic days that I'm some days just like frantically overwhelmed with. And so I think that the benefit in that example of coming back to some mindfulness is just being like, this is temporary. And so many of the things that have us in these heightened states that we get into when things are just moving super fast paced and we're overwhelmed, most of them are very temporary situations that someday we're going to look back and be like, those were the days. I'm going to look back at this summer and be like, those were the days that this was all we had to worry about. All I had to stress about was driving my kid to his friend's house, right? Someday that's going to be like, I wish that was my only problem or my biggest annoyance of the day or whatever. And so I think that is just a really good example of the benefits of mindfulness is when it can bring us back to center and bring us back to what is really important in life. And we're living it. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Like I'm actively living the big life that I always wanted. And yes, sometimes that's going to mean that things are getting really crazy and chaotic and I'm overwhelmed. But when I can add this piece of mindfulness in to just bring that back to awareness, that's where you see a lot of those benefits that people talk about with this mindfulness thing. And I think mindfulness can mean something different to anybody. You kind of have to figure out what it means for you and what works really well for you as an individual.
Yeah. There was a podcast that I listened to recently. I think it was Ed Milet. You probably listened to it as well, Mindy. I actually think it was the one that even Ed Milet, one of the best podcasters in the world, screws up sometimes and had, after his commercial break, it went to a different episode that he was recording. I'm pretty sure it was that episode that I was listening to, but it was the first half of the episode. He had on a psychologist. I can't remember his name anymore, but anyway, he was talking about, yes. And he was talking about how we plant these seeds of the red. Like, I love that you just called it the color red, because it's like we plant these seeds of red in our brain all the time of like, I gotta rush here and I'm doing this and I'm late here and God, why do I have to do that? I'm so frustrated and I'm mad. And those seeds grow into then these bigger plants and trees eventually. And now all of a sudden it's like we're seeing red all the time. And so he talks about like just planting the seed of green in the beginning. And I think that really comes down to mindfulness of like making sure when you're in those moments of chaos, like, can we just reframe this and flip this a little bit to be a green seed instead of a red seed, and then allow that to grow. And just the state of your mind, then if we can be a little bit more mindful about the thoughts that we're planting in our brain, and then how that can grow into helping us. What this episode is all about is helping us achieve those bigger dreams, but being present yet at the same time and sort of preparing our brains for that dream.
Yeah. And understanding to how the two serve each other. And it's similar to like what we talked about last week when we talk about like, you need the ones, those days that feel like ones, you need those to appreciate the tens. And I think this is the same thing. Like when we need the mindfulness, which feels very opposite. Like for somebody like me, I don't want to take time to rest. I don't want to take time to relax. I don't want to take time to meditate. I don't like those things don't feel good to me. They feel counterproductive. But what I have learned and what I'm continuing to learn, because, I think that it's very true when you find yourself in situations repetitively, there's a lesson that you're not picking up. And for me right now, it's that I'm sick again, and I keep taking steps in the right direction to slow myself down and to take responsibility off my plate. And then I get sick of it because that doesn't feel natural to me. And I want to go. And I want to do all these things. And I want to accomplish everything. And I want to do it in half the time that anybody else has ever done it in the history of life. And then I end up getting sick again because I start ramping up, and then my body's like, nope, we can't do that anymore. Like we need. And so my point is that the importance of finding that balance and understanding how, like, this mindfulness, whatever that means to you, this, whether it's meditation or just slowing down, taking a breath, pausing, taking a nap, like whatever it is, it may feel very counterproductive if you're somebody like me. But the reality is, like, I am never going to accomplish the goals and the dreams that I have, as big as they are, until and unless I start listening to the messages that I'm repeatedly getting, and I start being more mindful and resting and relaxing. And so it feels like they don't serve each other, but they absolutely serve each other. And I don't think that we can accomplish the goals that we have in life without completely burning out if we don't learn this skill set of, call it mindfulness, meditation, whatever you want to call it. Like, you have to, it's the ebb and the flow. It is literally the yin and the yang of being able to do big things, in my opinion.
Yes, because it clears your brain. When your brain is clear of all of that mess and all of that fog, it's like the dream is it feels like you can get there because you can see where you're going. And so that is what the 12-hour walk did to me. That is what just mindfulness in general does to me, is it clears. I can appreciate right now, and what that's doing for me is clearing my mind and taking away the chaoticness of the go, I got to do this and I got to do this and I can't slow down. And I wish I could I just won't sleep tonight. I'll just keep, like, it clears that from your brain, because that's impossible. We can't do that. But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, the goal, that like slower pace, I use the analogy of like eating the elephant one bite at a time versus trying to do it all at once. Yeah. And we have to just step back in order to go forward.
Yeah. And I read this book. There were a couple books that I read at the same period of time that were equally influential. So I may get it mixed up, but I'm thinking it was The Big Leap. Did you ever read that book? Anyway, the book that I'm thinking of talks about win streaks. And it talks about like every single day, at the end of the day, going back and counting 3 wins. And I actually did this for a while on social media, on Instagram. Every single day, I would, at the end of the day, post my 3 wins on Instagram. And it was just a way for me to kind of hold myself accountable to my win streak, because I think that that's another really important part of trying to figure out how our like the mindfulness idea can really enhance your big dreams and help you accomplish big things, is like taking the time every single day to reflect and think about the wins. Like we have to celebrate the small wins in life. And I know that I've gone in streaks where I've been really good at it. And like now, I mean, it's not something that I'm practically or actively doing right now, which I should, but I haven't been. But I do remember how much that just, again, anything that you can do to just help you slow down and just take some inventory as to where you are in life, because there's been lots of days in the last 2 weeks since my kids got out of school that I wanted to rip all of my hair out. But if I really stop to think about the wins and the beauty of life right now in the chaos, I have way more to be super grateful about. And and happy about, and just mostly grateful for, than I do to complain about. But if what you focus on expands. So if I'm focusing on how annoyed I am that I have to be constantly in and out of my car, driving 2 kids all over the place, that's going to be the reality of my day. If I end the day by thinking about it as a win, even if I redo that, like, I'm grateful that I had that car ride with that kid so that we could have this moment where we talked about this thing in their life and they opened up to me a little bit. Like, reframing some of those challenges that can tend to feel like a very negative thing in our lives, and just reframe them as like, how is that a win? Actually, how can I turn this situation into a win? And then starting to count the wins in our lives. And then all of a sudden our brain is looking for the wins versus looking for another thing to be frustrated with. I called my mentor last week and was like, I'm about to lose it. I am like this close. I'm going to jump off a cliff here. It was one thing after another. And a lot of it was little offenses. And I don't even know that they were intentional, but I think we're all in this fast-paced craziness right now. And so, somebody would send me a text message and it seemed like really a rude tone or whatever. And so all of these things were just building and building. And I was offended by like everybody. And I knew that it was because it was like on my radar. I was like looking to be offended by people because that's what I was aware of, instead of, and so I stopped. I carved out time in my schedule and I went for a walk. And then I started, I was able to reframe that and start thinking about like, well, I wonder if they're also stressed out because of that or this. And so I started like reframing all of these things and trying to look at things from other people's perspective. And again, when you start doing that, then you're looking, your brain just finds, like, our subconscious, that's what it does. It wants to find evidence. And so now I was finding evidence for where people were maybe struggling, that they needed some extra grace, instead of I was looking for every way that anybody and everybody was offending me. And so we have to like switch that, and we have to spin it and reframe it. And then we'll be able to kind of get ourselves out of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I can never remember this. I ask you this question all the time, but it's like when you start looking for the white Jeeps, then you see the white Jeeps everywhere. And so
your reticular activating system.
Yeah. I will ask you that question again, probably in a month when this conversation, I won't remember it. But it's that concept of, if we can see the bad and we look for the bad, we're gonna find bad. If we can see and look for the good, then we will find the good.
Yeah,
celebrating those small wins.
Yeah, there's this other tool that I have learned to use, and I think it was either in that same book or it was in a different book. I don't remember now. But anyway, it's called the Emotional Guidance Scale. And it's really cool. You should look it up. It's literally this scale, and like the top one is, joy, happiness, or whatever. And then the bottom one is sadness, depression, whatever. And it's this scale of emotions. And I know for me that if I can either spiral myself up or I can spiral myself down. And like, so last week I was like, I knew that I was spiraling myself out of control, like in the downward motion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that I needed to like snap myself out of it and start vibrating myself back up into this higher frequency on the emotional guidance scale. And I just think that that's a really important visual. I think it's really helped me when I am like, I can now recognize when I'm in this pattern of like, oh boy, things are starting to spiral and I need to adjust something. I need to fix something. And then I can start to get myself turned around in the right direction. But ultimately what it comes down to is acknowledging it, recognizing it. And then it's a matter of taking some mindfulness, whether it's just stopping to like take some deep breaths, go outside and just take some deep breaths. It takes such little time, and it can literally be what drives you in turns that around and drives you in the right direction. And because again, at the end of the day, I don't think can accomplish these big dreams and goals if we don't figure out some of this stuff, like how to turn around, how to reframe, how to walk ourselves off a cliff, or maybe find a friend that we need that can help us backtrack. And so it's just another, I bring it up because it's just a great tool that gives me a visual, and it reminds me when I'm spiraling out of control that, like, okay, we got to turn this around.
Yeah. Well, I think the mindfulness of being able to be more positive in your present not only then doesn't allow you to waste your life away waiting for this goal to come to fruition, right? It's like you are living your life now. But when you can just simplify like that, it, like, you can see your strengths a lot better too. That's what I really like about this practice of mindfulness, is not only the being able to live in the present, but when you can clear your head like that of all of the junk and really focus and turn internally on what's going on right now, it's like all of a sudden your strengths become a lot more clear. And as you build and grow and lean into those strengths of yours, it's like, how do I leverage those to help build my dream? So I think you get to know yourself a lot better. And if you can get to learn yourself a lot better, it's like all of a sudden that goal becomes a lot more feasible because you simplified your life and because you did the mindfulness work to get to that core, back to that core spot that we talked about earlier of like, who am I? And now how do I use this version of myself to build? So I feel like you're accomplishing these two really great things at the same time. But I think that can be one of the misconceptions of mindfulness too, is like, I'm not going to focus on the dream right now. I'm going to focus on being mindful in my present. And that I think is a really important thing for people to understand, of like, being in the present doesn't mean that you're not working towards the dream. It's like you're fueling the back office so the front office can go work and get to the dream. So it's such a critical part. And I think just a common misconception of mindfulness and being in the present is that, if anything, is the most important part to help fuel the dream later down the road.
Yeah. Well, and just being able to see more clearly, because, I think about opportunities that I'm sure that I have missed, but I also have seen opportunities that I didn't miss, where I feel that if I would have been in a different state of mind, and maybe not as mindful and as clear-headed, I would have missed some opportunities because I just would have seen them through a different lens, and I would have maybe looked at them from a different perspective. When it's really like, when we are more clear-headed and we are more aware and mindful and positive and all that stuff, it can really make a difference in how quickly we accomplish those goals and dreams, because we can see things clearly. We don't miss milestones. The other thing, or not milestones, but you know what I mean. We don't miss opportunities that may have arose. What?
Arisen.
I'm losing it here.
Who knows?
Arisen? I don't know.
No,
Anyways.
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The other thing that I keep a pretty good pulse on is the influence I have over other people. And that also helps me to prioritize mindfulness and to just recognize when I'm sort of out of control and I need to kind of get in the woods and decompress a little bit, because my family would agree that I'm the thermostat. And if I'm losing it, if I'm starting to like unravel in all the ways that I can unravel, my whole family starts to unravel. Where if I'm high up on the emotional guidance scale, so is my family. If I'm down at the bottom of the emotional guidance scale, I'm going to drag all my family members right down there with me. So knowing the influence that you have over those around you and the people that you love. I mean, you know people who like walk into a room and they have this like really good aura, or maybe really bad. We both know people that have both of those things. And so when we can recognize, I mean, because I think that we all have the ability to be either one of those people in different circumstances. And so I know for me, when I can recognize that I am being one of those, that I'm bringing my family down. Like maybe my husband walked in and he was in a good mood. Now he's not, because it's another one of those really important things to be self-aware of, because we can really influence those around us if we don't take the time to get our heads straight. And I know for me, it's outside, it's getting alone in the woods, it's nature, it's the deep breathes. I am really struggling. Taking deep breaths, those kinds of things really help me to just get my head straight again.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's not your personality type, but you got to know what it is for you, and you have to be able to be self-aware as to like, okay, I'm out of control here.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought up the thermostat point, because we have both talked about that before, and talk about, I mean, there's another layer of you're the cold or the negative thermostat in your house, and you bring your whole family down with you. Talk about making it impossible to help you reach a goal. But that puts a lot of weight on the people. And I'm sure the majority of people listening to this podcast are in similar positions. If you are someone like us, you're likely the thermostat in your family as well. So I think it's such an important thing for us to recognize. I think I have found myself, I get bitter about being in that position sometimes, of being the thermostat in the family, of like, why do I need to be the one that controls everybody's attitude? But I think that, talk about mindfulness, I'm very appreciative that I am in that position and have positioned my life and myself in a way that allows me to have that kind of influence. And like, let's not take that for granted. Let's be mindful of it and know when we need to do that reset. Like, oh wow, I am bringing the whole family down right now. I need to escape. I gotta check myself right now. That takes a lot of mindfulness in itself, to recognize that I gotta take a step back, or I gotta switch gears here. That in itself, I think, is hard for a lot of people to do. But if we can recognize when we are starting to spiral like that, let's stop and pause and find that thing. Like you said, maybe it's not a hike, but maybe it's just sitting out on your porch by yourself, or laying in bed and reading a book. I mean, it could be anything. Doesn't matter what it is, but something to just recenter yourself again.
Yeah. And I think that you're, what you said about sometimes maybe being a little bit resentful, that like, well, why do I have to be in charge of this? That's a great example of, because I've felt that way too, of why am I responsible for all of the emotions of this whole family? But you could also spin that and be like, I am so grateful that I am such a strong leader in my family, that I get to influence them, and I get to be this important like center hub for everybody. And so I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up, is to talk about gratitude, which is really funny, because anybody that knows me from when the gratitude thing was like this huge craze knows that I hated it. I was like, this is so stupid. I am not writing down every day that I am grateful for my cup of coffee and the sun that's shining and whatever, because I think it was one of, like, when we started this episode, it was one of those things. It was almost like a trend, and I was like, oh, gag me.
Yeah.
However, I have come around to understand that when you can like get out of the habit of making it a task to quote unquote be grateful, and like write down what you're grateful for, and have the gratitude journal or whatever, and you can actually step into a state of gratitude and really think about life and feel it. It's one thing to just say it and think it, like, oh, I'm so grateful that I have 2 kids, whatever, It's another thing to actually get yourself in a state where you can feel that emotion of gratitude. And I do think that when we do that, it can really change everything about a situation, a scenario, a feeling, an opinion, a perspective. I mean, it has a lot of power, but it's not just this lame gratitude journal that's being sold in every Hallmark across the country. It's actually taking time to get into the emotion of gratitude.
I love that so much, because as soon as you know when you're feeling gratitude versus when you're saying gratitude. Because if you have ever felt gratitude, like I saw you kind of pointing to your belly, like that feeling of like deep down in your core, you're feeling gratitude. When you were saying that, I was thinking about like what moments have I had recently where I felt gratitude, and why was I feeling them in that moment? It was always when I'm just present in my life and recognizing what's important and what's not important. And that important stuff has everything to do with the dreams and the goals and the family that I've built. And so if we can feel and know those dreams and those goals, it's like that when you get to that gratitude place of living in the present and fueling the dream, it's so easy to feel it deep down in your belly if you can be in touch with what really is important and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that would be the final tip that I would say is, if you're wondering how you start taking these steps to making sure you're being mindful in an effort to accomplish these big dreams and goals, that's probably one of the biggest takeaways, is that if you can get yourself into a state of actually feeling that gratitude towards where you are, it will do all of those things that we're talking about. It will bring your center back to where you are and help you clear your head and do all of those things that ultimately in the long term they're going to end up being the moments and the days that actually catapulted you, that actually helped you achieve the big goals and the big dreams, because it kept you on track, and it kept you enjoying the journey and the process, which is ultimately what we're trying to both accomplish. I don't want to miss the good old days anymore. Like I want to recognize that as much as I'm frustrated some days, that like with all the sports and all the drives and all the things, I want to also recognize that these are the good old days that I'm living right now. Like I don't want to not know that anymore. So for all you big dreamers out there, we really hope that this helped you recognize how important the other side of dreaming and achieving is, which is the downtime and the rest, the restoration, the mindfulness, gratitude, all of those things. So thank you so much for listening. And we are going to ask again that if you found any value in this episode today, please, please, please share it with a friend or family member that you think would also benefit from listening to this message. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week on the Banyan Effect podcast. We hope you have enjoyed today's episode and found some valuable insights. If you liked what you heard, we'd love it if you would hit the subscribe button.
We love hearing from our listeners, so drop us a comment, share your thoughts on social, or review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback keeps us going and helps us bring you the content you want to hear.
As always, we appreciate your time and company. Until next time.